This particular lecture is about the scope of the problem and trying to make the case for ergonomics. It's a broad overview, but the idea is that I want to be able to sell you on this course and its content and its value to you. Because if you're like me, life is too short to be wasting a lot of time on something that you don't find any value to. So if you come up to me after a couple of lectures and say, I still don't get what you're talking about, I don't see what it means to me, let's talk and we'll figure out something, we'll try to make something happen. But in particular, where it kind of all comes together, because I do ask a little patience here, is that it will come together as we get further and further into the course and as we find a project that's relevant to what you like to do. So, and to your career. So, what our purpose then here, I know there's a little thing here that...
no, because you're using a PDF and not...
Oh, I can't, is that what you brought in? No wonder, I can't mark it up.
That's because that's what's posted to the course system.
Yeah. Well, I think there's actually a regular PowerPoint in there. They can't see it, but okay, that's right. And you can't see it because I only can see it. All right. So, anyways, we're gonna get you involved with the definition, breadth, scope of ergonomics, and then following this, you'll be able to discuss some of the key points related to the facts and figures and legislation of ergonomics, the chronology of events, where OSHA is and where they're going forward, and what they're currently doing in the area of ergonomics legislation. National health spending. This is to really set the case. What I try to do is I start out with about the 18,000 foot level, if you will, of what's this all about in terms of relevance to where we are with healthcare. So when we go back to about 2010, we're about $2.5 trillion in spending, about 18% of the GDP. By 2018, so we're moving toward that end, and actually it's pretty much on this trajectory. National healthcare expenditures are expected to be about 4.4 trillion, more than double what we were spending in 2007. So it's continuing to climb rapidly. But guess who's absorbing a lot of the cost? You are, right, and your parents. National health expenditures are expected to increase faster than the GDP. Between 2008 and 2018, the national increase in these expenditures is about 6.2% a year, while the GDP is expected to only grow by 4.1%. So healthcare expenditures are going faster than the growth of the economy, is what we have here. So in just 3 years, Medicare and Medicaid, and you remember this from, did you take my 201 class, or did you get that from Dr. Rosenthal? How many from Dr. Rosenthal? Oh boy. Okay. All right. So you know the difference between Medicare and Medicaid, right? Medicaid is basically the indigent and those that have income issues, and Medicare are those for 65 and over. Right? So when we look at the combination of the two, this is all federal spending. It really adds up to be a fairly significant element. It accounts for 50% of all national health spending and is continuing to increase. So Medicare's hospital insurance, the trust fund, is expected to pay out more in hospital benefits than any other expenditures this year, and it receives in taxes and dedicated revenues. And according to one study that was done, over $2.2 trillion in the U.S. spent on health care in 2006. Nearly $650 billion was expected to be above that versus other nations. Where this starts to come in is that what is the quality of health care in this country versus other countries? For a long time, the model was in Canada. Say, look at Canada, look how great they are. They have socialized health care, so on and so forth. And they do have some great opportunities there. The problem is they can't get to some of their patients fast enough. So they may see something. It might be, let's say, a skin cancer. And it may start out something as fairly small that can be excised, but by the time they're able to get to that person, it might be 6 months into it. It may have gone from basal cell to melanoma, and that can be very serious stuff. So there are these issues where in this country you pay a little bit more, but if you really got to get in there and see somebody, they can usually be able to accommodate you if it's an emergency. Employer-employee health care cost. Over the last decade, employer responsibility health insurance premiums have gone up over 119%. They continue to rise. and employees have seen their share of job-based coverage increase at nearly the same rate, charging for jumping about $1,500 to more than $3,000. Think of that big jump that's going on. And then if you think of you're supporting a family of 4, it really goes so high that a lot of people just can't afford to retire if they have some kind of health care support from their employer. Purdue, since I've been here, when I joined Purdue in January of '99, the health insurance was pretty good. They covered just about anything for you, and it was very reasonable in terms of monthly premiums and so on, even for a family. And now we're seeing more and more changes in terms of taking away the benefits. Because I was retired PHS, I came in with TRICARE, so I never really needed the university insurance. But I thought it was better than what we had at the time. Now TRICARE just completely smokes what the university is offering. And so a lot of the service people, and I'll mention this a couple times here, service people come in and clean these floors and make this university what it is. And I'm really proud of Purdue. When you walk on this campus, you don't see graffiti, you don't see trash, you do see trash get picked up, so on and so forth. And what happens, I think, a lot of times, the students make these kind of invisible people. They're sort of invisible, don't even notice them. But yet you see them, they're kind of older, doing their thing, and they make this campus look great. So many of them really work hurt, but they can't afford to retire, because if they do, they won't be able to carry the health insurance with them. You know what the health insurance now is for someone who's under the age of 65, let's say they're around 57, 58 years old, and you say, you know what, I'm pooped out. I'm worn out. I just want to, stay home with my grandkids, that kind of thing, and enjoy them. You know what it is? $1,300 a month. That's just the insurance. That's not for the health care bill that comes in for the unpaid differences that they can't afford. So they just say, I can't carry that. And so what you see is what you see. It's really kind of interesting. A lot of them do work hurt, and this is part of what's going on out there. I share this with you because I think you're going to be the difference makers here. We got to figure out a better way. We really do. So when we look at healthcare insurance costs, then we're looking at the cumulative increase in these employer-sponsored health premiums, and the increase has made it much more difficult for businesses to continue. So this is where it really hits on the smaller businesses, big time, especially those at 12 employees or less. Which it's an interesting fact in Indiana. While a lot of people are driving along. And they look at Indiana and say, man, you're nothing but a bunch of cornfields and soybean plots. That's all I see when I drive through Indiana. Yet it is not known that of 6 million people in this state, that per capita, we have the highest manufacturing capacity in the country. When you do it per capita, which is a pretty significant fact. Think about that. Why? Because Indiana is just loaded, completely loaded with small businesses. So you drive along, you see a cornfield, but if you look more carefully, there's a little factory right in the middle of it, between that soybean and that corn plot. There's a factory there. And I guarantee you, go out on a bike ride, go around here, go up, 500 down 231, so on. You'll go past by all kinds of small little companies doing their thing, and it's quite interesting. And these guys work hard for the money, and they're the ones feeling the impact. So when we look at health insurance costs. They're over $850 billion by 2019, climbing up. Family spending this amount, $350 billion in 2010, will now spend $550 billion in 2019. Continues to go up. Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, has estimated job-based health insurance will increase 100% in the next 10 years. Think about that, a double. Employer-based family insurance for a family of 4. Will reach nearly $25,000 per year by 2018, absent of any kind of health care reform. That's one of the reasons why we have this act going into place. We're a couple of years into it. There are a lot of people still debating it. Some states are going to say, I'll throw it out. It's not constitutional, this and that, and so on. I think this horse has already left the barn. It's pretty well down the track. I say it's all going to stay in place, but it'll be really interesting to see if something does get stopped along the way, what gets stopped in terms of this health care act that went through a couple years ago. So we're looking at rising health care costs. Economists have found that rising costs correlate significantly with the drops in health insurance coverage. Well, the idea was to include that about 48 million people, we have 316 million people in this country, and about almost 50 million people weren't insured. So the whole idea of this Affordable Care Act was to pick up that group and say, you know what, we want to get you insured here. This is crazy that you're going to go, something happens, you go to the emergency room and try to get something fixed. Who picks up the bill? That's one of the reasons why you pay $1,500 for an ambulance ride to the hospital, because you're picking up all the other costs that people couldn't afford to pay. And that starts to add up. Well, they want to bring on those 48 million people, and it turns out even with this act moving forward that they're only going to pick up about maybe 60% of those. They're not going to be able to pick up everybody. So it's kind of interesting. Not everyone's included. So a recent study found 62% of all bankruptcies filed in 2007 were linked to medical expenses. This continues today. It's a little bit better today, but there was obviously it was combined with the crash in the economy that we had 2007, 2008. Most of that was because of greed and the fact that we had no guardrails in terms of lending and so on for housing. But we have recovered, thank God, and hopefully we'll continue to do so. And for those who filed for bankruptcy, 80% had health insurance, which is interesting. So it wasn't like health insurance was something that took them out. So according to another published article, about 1.5 million families lose their homes to foreclosure every year due to unaffordable medical costs. And this is what I was just talking about. If someone loses their job, and one of the things that our president's doing, and this is not a political comment, it's just a fact. President Daniels he's outsourcing a lot of stuff. So printing services, for example, one of the things that was a benefit to me was that if I needed to get you something today, something came up in the newspaper, I wanted all of you to have this in hand. This article that talked about fraud and disability or something of that nature. I can't do that anymore. I could do it last year. I can't do it anymore this year. Why? Because it's all been outsourced. And anything that I want to get you is going to require at least 3-day minimum notice to print it. So there's a price to pay for this kind of stuff for the outsourcing. So as a result, all those people who were printing services that produced, they are gone. They were all released last spring. So what happens to those people? They're not 65, right? It all ends up here. So small businesses then will pay about $2.4 trillion over the next 10 years for a cost of workers. 178,000 small businesses will be lost by 2018. $834 billion in small business wages will be lost. High health insurance costs. Small businesses will lose about $52 billion in profits, and 1.6 million small business workers will suffer job lock. Roughly about 1 in 16 currently insured by their employers. In other words, they can't increase their wages because they are continuing to pay more and more in health insurance. So in order to maintain a certain profit buffer, that amount of money coming in stays the same. And that's actually been something that's been happening over the last 10 years. So we have a lot of spending in health care and medical care on implementing an upward path for a number of decades. From 1960, the aggregate health expenditures in the U.S. was about $27 billion. 2003, that figure stood at $1.7 trillion. Basically a 63-fold increase, and it continues to go up from there. In contrast, the U.S. population grew only 51%. Health expenditures per capita rose from $143 in 1960 to $5,670 in 2003, a 40-fold increase, and it continues to rise. And general inflation pushed up prices and goods and services by only 5-fold. So you can see where health expenditures are going with all this stuff. So when we get into facts, now I'm going to bring it into musculoskeletal disorders. So I showed you the big picture of healthcare costs. And basically, what does that have to do with ergonomics? And it's important for me to help you, connect the dots in here, because musculoskeletal disorders and safety-related issues are closely tied to cost. So in the United States alone, the annual cost associated with diagnosis and care of musculoskeletal trauma amounts to tens of billions of dollars a year. The last estimate, just for back injuries alone, over $100 billion a year, just for back injuries. United States today, occupational musculoskeletal disorders are the leading cause of work disability. And if you printed out your notes, you'd be making circles here, because those are great quiz questions. You say, wow, That's pretty interesting. United States today, occupational musculoskeletal disorders are the leading causes of work disability. I'm not saying number 10, not top 50, leading cause. Changes in healthcare policy and demand for improved allocation of healthcare resources by the government have recently placed greater pressure on healthcare professionals to provide more cost-effective treatment and so on. So what happens is that many of you that want to go off to medical school and become doctors, and God love you for it, is that the way medicine used to be, we sit down and really listen to the patient versus come in there and you've got, you better lay it all out. What is it that you have? Because I got to move you out the door in 5 or 6 minutes and get someone else in here in order to make my quota for the day. And you sometimes, maybe you've experienced this kind of thing, but they have to push things through. But now there are all kinds of checks and balances in there so they don't make any errors, especially the idea of coming back within 30 days, right, with an infection or a hospital-related outcome as a result of your surgery. The government's now penalizing these hospitals for that. So now they're paying a little more attention to what's going on with you, which helps. So this is the key take-home point here. You see this graph, and you say I take it up through 94. It's important to show you a couple things. One is, if you look at what's going on in terms of these increases, these illnesses due to repeated trauma, total illness cases, other illnesses. And then if we follow this one right here, follow that, look at, there's an inflection point that basically picks up right here in about the mid-1980s. And you say, wow, okay, something must have happened, because look at how that just really picked up. Any idea on how these kind of things happen? I all said you have a change in inflection. I'll get right to the point of it so that you understand where I'm coming from. Usually if you see, something like this, where, this is number of cases in thousands, right? There had to be something that happened, a policy change, a law change, maybe a lawsuit, something big happened on a grand scale that caused this inflection right here. It's what you always want to look for. If you go back and you look at any kind of record, and you see all of a sudden things like this, and there's a quick change, what happened? What happened at that point? And you usually have to give it a year or two in order to, things to sink, especially if it's a policy thing or it's a law thing or a lawsuit thing that comes in. Well, when you go back, look at this here, right here, another good quiz question. Disease categories rank ordered by limitation of activity. Number 1 is musculoskeletal system. You see where this is starting to tie in a little bit with healthcare costs? Okay, if that's number 1, you have to know that a big chunk of healthcare costs are associated with musculoskeletal disorders. It's a pretty big deal. And then followed by circulatory system, nervous system, respiratory system, mental disorders, digestive system, and so on. But year in and year out, the musculoskeletal system still is up there in terms of limiting activity on the job. It's a big cost drain. So why have occupational musculoskeletal disorders increased since the mid-1980s? Well, many of you can come up with this. First is we're aging up. As of a couple of years ago, how many, Dr. Rosenthal covered this in public health class, but when we think of the baby boomers, what's the time period of baby boomers? 46 to 64. What's easy to remember about that is that 4, 6, and then just reverse it, flip it, 64. So during that time, this country was cranking out a lot of people, including me. And so if you run the math, as of a couple of years ago, guess what? 10,000 people a day in this country are turning 65, which means they're going on Medicare, which means they are sucking big time in terms of healthcare costs, right, in the country. And you're all looking at each other and saying, oh my gosh, how can we sustain all that stuff? Well, a lot of us aren't going to just basically poop out at 65 and say, I'm going to go on Social Security. Some of us are going to go up to the age of 70, and if all goes well, you keep going from there, and you don't collect until you say, I'm done. Right? And then the money starts coming in. So not everyone's going to cash in at 65, but 10,000 people a day, starting 2 years ago, started doing that. That's the average that's happening right now. So we are aging up. Greater percentage of females working than ever before. And if you just look around, just look around. You look to your left, you look to your right. More and more females are now, like a place like Purdue, see a little bit more in engineering in terms of males, but in terms of females, this college, not only do we have more females than males in this college, in all 9 units, because we have 2 schools and the others are departments. We're one of the schools. But we also have more female faculty in our college than we do male faculty, which is kind of an interesting fact. And guys, just get used to it, because the ladies are going gangbusters. You know, most of those getting admitted to medical school are girls. Most going to pharmacy, you see that now, 90% now are female. Physical therapy, occupational therapy, just about every profession. Industrial hygiene, not as much, about 50-50, but you could shoot a cannon through a place and not hit a female if you wanted one to come industrial hygiene. You just didn't see them out there. You see them out there now about 50-50. Why? Because they are just blowing the guys away in terms of GPA, opportunities to go on to advanced school, getting scholarships, getting awards, making 6-figure salary. They're saying, you know what, they're in command and control, and they got it figured out long before we do. We're out there like playing video games and doing sports and goofing around until finally, after that 100th car wash where, you know, Joe Schmo jumps on you for not doing some sort of thing. So, you know what, I got to go back to school. I get my act together. And a lot of guys do that. But as it is right now, the girls are just, they're just taking no prisoners. They're doing really, really well. And we're seeing them show up in the workplace as your boss more often than not. I see it now.
So, why would it have more females in the workplace the disorders? I don't see it.
Well, actually, one is that most of them are going to college now, and a lot of them didn't go before. So they have opportunities for better paying jobs in terms of administration, management, technical skills, so on and so forth. That's number one. So they now have the same opportunity that the males had. If you went back, a lot of them did, what their job was, if you go back to the 1950s and so on, is that the model was, you know, the female would go up through high school, graduate high school, get married to their sweetheart and so on. Sometimes their guys would work in a job, sometimes and then they go on to college and so on. But their job would be the homemaker, right? The domestic engineer, raise a family, so on and so forth. So they stopped. Right? They had the capability of going on, some did, but not like today. There's just basically no limitations to what women can do today, because while I believe that even though there's some sense that there's a glass ceiling out there, you look to various authors like the book that came out called Lean In, for example, and just women basically advocating for themselves and looking for more salary, being comparable to what they do, and so on and so forth. You're seeing that kind of movement. They're very organized, and so as a result of that, you're seeing more and more women in the workplace for lots of reasons. One is income, job security, sharing responsibility. So if you have a family, the husband picks up as much of the load as the wife does, and it's socially more acceptable than it used to be. There used to be as socially acceptable as it is now. So what do you do at work? You've got a family at home. You should be at home. There's no stigma to that anymore. Basically, shared responsibility.
So is it because the workforce is drastically expanding since 1980 that you have
It's not only is it expanding, but I'll get into this a little bit. We've shifted from manufacturing, right, to more service and information kinds of work as well.
and those disorders are most likely happening that kind of.
That's correct. You're anticipating me. I like that. All right, we're getting into it. So, changing our economic base, which is our next point, heavy manufacturing. And if you go up to Chicago, right, and you've got big steel up there, we don't even own our steel companies anymore. Right? This is Answer. Yeah, those guys. Right, they've got great found, but I think it's owned by an Indian. Yeah, we used to have Bethlehem steel. JMC, okay. Okay, is that an American base? Yeah. Okay, great. We see much of that anymore. So, and now we move to lighter manufacturing and information services, right? Lots of services stuff out there. And then, as we follow this down, we see an increase in citations by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. Some of that was going on. because meatpacking industries, for example, I was involved in all that stuff in terms of major citations and research in that area. But really what happened, the kicker was, I mean, again, this is an inflection point, right? So you can see trends, and you're not going to see that change in slope. But this is right here, court's decision that work-related musculoskeletal disorders were compensable. This is in your book, and written by my friend and colleague Jim Montgomery, Legal Aspects of Ergonomics. And what it got into was this aspect of this Michael Village. This started out in 1980. And Michael Village, just an assembly guy, at a GM plant, and he hurt his back, moving batteries, throwing to the assembly line and dropping it down, into cars. And next day he couldn't get out of bed. And he basically went in and said, I hurt my back, putting these batteries in here, and the employer said, GM said, tough. It's wear and tear, man. It's just, that's the way it is. You're out of here and bring in another person to do your job. He said, no, wait a minute. I was doing this work, and I hurt myself. And there should be some kind of compensation. They said, no, this is just normal wear and tear. You took this job, you assumed the risk, you hurt your back, too bad. So this guy says, no, I don't like it. I'm going to take it to court. So he took on General Motors. Can you imagine? Huge. It went through a whole process through the courts in Ohio and worked its way up to the Ohio Supreme Court and so on. And when he filed for all this, alleging that his injury occurred in the course and the scope of his employment, right here, the rationale imposed by the Supreme Court of Ohio was that Mr. Village developed his backache, and it was the law of the lower courts are bound to follow until a changed Ohio State Supreme Court ruling reversing a long-time list of cases that, in yellow right here, workers with such injuries were now able to obtain disability classifications and draw compensation for what used to be considered predictable, expected, non-compensable wear and tear injuries. Think about that. It was a game changer. So if you are working at Papa John's, or you're working tables, or you're washing cars, and you hurt yourself, workers' comp will come in and be able to address that issue. Whereas until Michael Village took on General Motors, he said, I'm sorry, you got a bad back? Bring in somebody else. Now you can get compensation because it was work-related, related to musculoskeletal disorders, related to your activities. Pretty big deal when all that went down. So back injuries now, shifting to the backs. Think about it. 80% of you, look around the room, 8 out of 10 of you will suffer a back injury in your lifetime. I had one, and I started to get this thing now. I don't know what it is. Came back from Australia about a week ago, and I still hope I get upgraded, but it's just so hard to get upgraded anymore to anything. And I'm back there in coach, and it's like stuffing a rhino in a thimble. Like that for 16 hours. It's horrible. And the next day, my back is just killing me because you're trying to sleep. Right? I got to sleep. And then I had a guy next to me by my side, woke up, had a blue shirt on. The guy had fell asleep on his shoulder. I'm not kidding. Woke up and he drooled. And not only did he drool, it was like old drool that had dried up. Like new drool coming down. So anyway, it's horrible. But I'm in bed, and I just kind of use my feet. I'm going to pinch it off, drop it off the edge of the bed. Oh God. Go to the cabinet, go to the Tylenol, that kind of thing. But we all suffer back injury. Fortunately for me, it's temporary. Good. But some people have it's a chronic condition, and it's got to impede on the quality of your life. So 8 out of 10. That's a fact. That's a quiz question. Over 30 million Americans currently experience low back problem. 13 million of those have resulted in a reduced ability to function. They just can't do their job. 10 million cases of impairment on the U.S. population between 18 and 64, of course, working age. Lost time from work. There's a significant drop in that in the past 30 years, where the incidence of low back pain has stayed the same. In other words, severity has increased, right, where the number of cases has stayed pretty much the same. So if you get injured, you're basically going to be out of work for a longer period of time. So it's almost like a survivor population, right, in terms of how long they're lasting. And then we estimated cost over $16 billion annually in compensable, non-compensable. Those are direct costs. Remember I gave you the number of $100 billion? We're talking about everything in terms of lost wages and so on and so forth. So this is our direct cost. And then the distribution of low back compensation is skewed. And many of you have heard about the 80-20 rule, right? Where a lot of times, I just, I want to put 20% of my effort into something that's going to give me an 80% return. You always want to find that sweet spot, right? In this case, it's basically looking at 25% of low back cases account for 95% of the cost. So basically, 1 out of 4 workers are basically taking down almost 100% of those costs. Why? Because it's the severity of the injury that's really causing the major cost to go up. Okay, so I talked a little bit earlier. You saw this scam, right, with the disability thing in Puerto Rico. And you gotta love Puerto Rico, right? They don't pay any taxes down there, by the way. So I love those guys. So, anyways, here they are doing this little scam. But with the ADA, it was created to get rid of discrimination. So if you came in with physical disability, if I could accommodate you and you could think about it, I will take it. I can't say you have a bad back, you have this or that. I have to take it to do some tests to show that you can't do certain jobs. So you may not handle, right? Let's say you've got emotional stress. Let's say you're bipolar. Right? Let's say you're bipolar, right? Can you manage a job being bipolar with meds and do fine? If I can't prove otherwise, I can't discriminate against you. You've got the job, right? And then there is, okay, just, you got to be really sharp for this job. These mathematical calculations and so on to work at McDonald's. All you're doing is punching happy faces all day long, right? Face stamp and one hamburger, 30 minutes, you're done. You're done with it. I don't really have to sit here and be a mathematical whiz to work at McDonald's. Okay, then you've got the job. So mental, emotional, and physical discrimination have been ruled out with the ADA. So far, so good. Everyone's got that. But the problem is that the issue has really come up with this business. Let me go back. With this business of workplace accommodations. Do you realize how many cases are found with the under ADA for people who have a job already? This is it. This is an important concept I want you to get down. Is that someone who suffers a workplace injury, let's say you suffer a workplace injury, what do you do? You work. What do you do? Still minute. Go. Go there. There you go. Now job. So, steel mill, and let's say you hurt your shoulder in the process of carrying all this stuff. Right? And you're saying, you know what, I want to get a cart with wheels, and instead of carrying this stuff, I'm going to be able to roll it along the lines and do what I need to do. And the employer, the steel mill, is going to accommodate this and say, well, no, it costs us too much. We're not going to do it. Then you can take them to court and say, no, this is a reasonable workplace accommodation for my shoulder issue, and you can come up with a wheeled cart. In fact, I'll even go out and buy one at Walmart, and it'll get me around having to do what I need to do. Right? So what's happened now with the ADA is that there have been more cases filed where people who have jobs, who have been injured on the job for musculoskeletal disorders, who now have been pushed into lower paying jobs because they can no longer do what they did before, and the excuse is they cannot accommodate them in terms of their disability. Everyone got me on that? So if you can prove that there isn't a workplace accommodation. Let's say you have something that goes wrong with your voice, and let's say you're an operator on a phone, right, where you're receiving messages and so on and so forth. What you can do is that they have these translators around there, right? So that's a workplace accommodation to help you out. So these things are coming into place. So that's the kicker with the ADA, is that it's not about keeping people out, it's about accommodations for people now that have jobs. That's it's called the EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Write that down and let them see that. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC. That's the group you go to make a case with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So some of you are saying, well, okay, this whole ergonomics thing, is it law? And look at the date on this thing. We go almost back to the Stone Ages here when we came out with proposed rule the first time, 1992. Are you kidding me? 1992, first time it came up, Barbara Silverstein, a colleague of mine at the University of Michigan, was spearheading it. She's a nurse, tried to push this thing through, and no one was buying it because it was, small businesses say it's just too much. She really tried to turn it into sort of an epidemiologic study on a national scale. Who's got problems, who's coming up with solutions, so on and so forth. It failed. First time up, it failed. This one did. About 8 years into it, it died. Right? So then, it came back. But this time under an engineer. Dave Cochran is the guy, also the friend of mine who's at the University of Oklahoma. And he was able to get this thing through because he emphasized the engineering solutions to this, in other words, the productivity aspects, quality control, etc., including safety and health, and was able to get this thing through. Everyone approved it, thought it was great. But then what happened is that President Bush became a president, the second Bush. There was a Republican Senate, and there was a Republican Congress, and small businesses lined up in the lobbies all around the Capitol, saying that this thing's going to put them out of business. And because of the trifecta with the Republican president, when Clinton went out, so we got a Republican president who came in, Republican majority House, Republican majority Senate, said, okay, it's a bad thing, it's going to go. But the kicker was, it was the Clinton administration that came up with this thing called the Congressional Review Act. Write that down, because that's also a good question. And the Congressional Review Act says any law that's passed that's so egregious to the nation in terms of the economy itself and so on can get dismissed. But there's a limit of 120 days. Guess what? It just came into office right in January. This thing just passed right here in 2001, and it was struck down. It was the first time in the history of the United States, by the way, that this thing was struck down. So it was a standard. It was a true standard, U.S. standard, and it went away before it really got up and running. Incredible. It took years to get this going, and it was a second run at it too, which is kind of interesting. So we go to the next aspects of this and say, when we look at musculoskeletal disorders, why we need to make it as a priority, taking it down, and that is that can OSHA, guy right here, David Michaels, and I'm going to quiz you on some of these names, by the way. They do turn over. I apologize, but you should know in this class who some of these people are. Can OSHA cite you, because we don't have a standard on that, can they cite you for an ergonomic-related hazard? Yes, they can. How can they do it? Under the general duty clause called 5A1. I'll write that down, general duty clause, so the hygienists know this by just memory of having it drilled into them. That anything that isn't standard out there, if it's egregious enough, can be under 5A1, which is general duty clause. And this guy has been doing it. This David Michaels has been doing it. He's hanging in there even through a second term. Well, these jobs can burn you out. They usually don't last very long. But he's still there. But we got a new guy. This guy, Perez, just came into office. And he was picked by President Obama, 26th Secretary of Labor. Just came in this past July 23rd. So he's smiling now, but see, everything he's still smiling too. If you get a newer picture of him, I'm not smiling anymore. So he's smiling. He doesn't know what's happening yet. And then Sibila, she's hanging in there, right? She has made it her cause. God love her. She's tough. Made it her cause to show the affordability of the Affordable Care Act. And so, this is a good thing. And she's out there, carrying that banner, doing all that she can, and she's smiling. So, I give her credit because she's been there in 2009. That's a long time in that kind of post. Good for her. And there's this guy, he hung in there too. He looks young in this picture. He's actually, I know, he looks actually older than this. It's one of those pictures that whenever you look at faculty when they first join, they never get any pictures. This guy looks older than this. But he's a very smart guy. And he's the head of the CDC, Substance Disease Control and Prevention, which after that comes this guy, John Howard. And he had a couple of stints with NIOSH, 2002 to 2008, and then from 2009 to the present. The guy's a class act. He really is an MD, JD, etc. I think he's doing the best he can with the budget that he has. But it's just kind of an interesting story here. He said, sort of did this, and you think, well, he said, I'm going to just take some time off of that. No, he didn't get along very well with the former director of the CDC, so she kind of put him on ice, and it was all about respirators. Basically, they got into a big fight between the surgical respirators that you see in operating rooms versus the N95s, right, for virus protection, so on and so forth. Anyway, they really got crosswords with each other, and he stepped down, and then she kind of got canned. The new guy came in, and they brought John Howard back. I'm not going to test on that. It's just kind of interesting about the dynamics of how these things work. So he's there. So, my expectation is that you know these guys. Okay, we got to know who David Michaels is. But Mr. Perez, we need to know who he is. Sebelius, we need to know her because she's in the same term. Certainly Frieden in his work. And by the way, this guy was involved in the Twin Towers. The reaction after the Twin Towers disaster and so on, in terms of all the health issues that came up from that. And that's one reason why he got the CDC. And then John Howard. So, with all this then, this is the acting director, and he said the 60,000 pound elephant in the room. He said ergonomics. He wanted to acknowledge the obvious things. First, it's a huge health and safety problem. And second, it's a huge political football. Some big players want to see it played, others want to get it tossed out, and so on and so forth. It's still going back and forth. But it continues to be a major problem in the workplace. It really does. So here are some of your links that you may want to look at in terms of ergonomics-related issues that you're part of your assignment if you want to. It's totally your call. And when you look at OSHA versus NIOSH, one of the things I want you to explore, I want to get ahead of this and kind of look at your party a little bit, is what's always interesting to me is what OSHA is interested in and their priorities. So they're kind of like the here and now, versus NIOSH, which is basically looking down the road and projecting what kind of issues are going to be coming. And so this is OSHA's homepage that you open up. And, and I sent you, the sort of step-by-step right here, right out of the gate in terms of issues. They're hitting on this whole heat stress stuff. It's interesting because if you go back 5 or 6 years, this wasn't even showing up on the radar with anybody. Heat stress issues, not as much. Now every year this shows up. Why do you think that is? Okay, some can say, well, climate change, so on and so forth. Very debatable. Okay, so let's take that out of the equation. What do you think is happening? Based on what I showed you so far, just one of the easier things to think about. Why is it showing up quite a bit? Yes. I'm sorry? Well, that's part of it, yeah, that's part of it, but there's actually a little longer trend. I mentioned it kind of number 10,000 here. Per day. Yes? Yeah, that's right. Older people can't take the heat, they're not as adaptable, let's say. Or they shouldn't be in these environments, right? Working in these hot environments and so on. They're not very good at seasonal changes. As much as they used to be, yet they're working in environments where this is an issue. And every day, we've got hundreds of cases of heat exhaustion and heat stroke. Heat stroke, obviously, being a lot worse than heat exhaustion. But it keeps coming up. And we are having places in the country where there are droughts, right? And heat stress that can make a difference. So right out of the gate, that's one of them right there. What can you do to prevent illnesses? And then another one's falls. I mean, I'm not even off of the landing page of OSHA, and I've hit upon a couple of issues in dealing with this course. If you go to NIOSH, this is their landing page. I don't think this is nice. I don't know what's happening to NIOSH. They used to have a nice page, but it sucks. What's going on over there? But you look at workplace violence. I'm going to talk about violence in this class. Firefighters, what a disaster, right? The Oklahoma thing, with all those hot shots, horrible. Preventing work-related heat stress and illnesses, okay, there's something to relate to what else is doing. Ladder safety, falls and so on. recommends new levels of exposure to nanomaterials. This can be best practices in handling and so on. So I'm not even off my landing page, and I can see some nice topics right there. But what I would do is, here's your A through Z. What are they up to? And I actually like this search, this one, a little bit better because it actually allows you to go through your A through Z alphabet once you click onto this and find out what they're going through. And you'd be amazed at all the stuff that OSHA's up to and all the things that NIOSH's up to. And once you click past this, you can go A, B, click on each one of these. But if you go past this, it actually gives you an A through Z listing, and you can just kind of quickly look at those. So, enforcement, obviously OSHA's got some enforcement. Primary goal is reduce injuries. Employers must keep their workplaces free of recognized hazards. So we talked about the 5A1 enforcement efforts. I've implemented ergonomics programs, are making good faith efforts to reduce those. So a lot of times they're just warnings. In fact, I just reset my kid. I was supposed to be at Bath Iron Works next week, Wednesday. There's just no way with all the stuff that's going on. I can fly out of here after class, get there, do what I need to do, and then come back and have class on Thursday, especially with all these other meetings I'm involved with. So I pushed back to about the middle of September or so, when I had a little more window. But here's a company that has just done some great stuff. They had issues between labor and management, someone with the BIW, owned by General Dynamics. This is a big company, right? There's a big outfit out there. And they just had a meeting of minds that came together. We brought in an ergonaut that made it all work. And they won the Ergo Cup, which is a very prestigious competition, 2 years in a row now. It's amazing. And, I've been honored to write up the story, the success story of these guys. And why? Because I was doing some of my original work with them before I left NIOSH and came to Purdue. So you go out there to see them, but the whole point is that this company worked really hard with labor to have a good faith effort to make it all work. What do they do? Because they make our battleships. They make some of the most fierce, machines in the world to protect our shores, and they take a lot of pride in that. So how can they do it well? They've worked on it, and they've got it figured out, which is great. OSHA conducts inspections on ergonomic hazards, safety issues, and then the clause. This is a couple of the IH students already told you what it is. And this is a key take-home point right here, just right there. Each employer shall furnish to each of his employees a place of employment which are free from recognized hazards that are causing or likely to cause death or serious physical harm to the employees. They shall comply with occupational safety and health standards promulgated. What does that mean? When you say free from recognized hazards, think about that. It just rolls off the tongue a lot faster than what it really is. Basically, you have to have three things. And number one, you have to have the records showing that people are suffering injuries over a period of time. Number two, failure to recognize that you've got a problem there or to intercede. And number three, which is very important, is the economic means to handle that problem. So when OSHA comes in and says, you're a huge company, like I just pointed out right here, you've got a way above average number of injuries compared to the standard industry. You have a means to fix it, and you're not doing it. Okay? And this is where this idea of free from recognized hazards. So that recognized concept comes into play with those factors. General duty clause. There's a lot of discussion about that. I really covered for you. So now for next Tuesday, I'm going to do a quiz. So don't wrap up on me here. I'll let you get through the first 4 chapters. Don't have to read all of them in depth because they're going to start using our clickers on that. But on the first couple, I do want you to read pretty carefully. One's on the anthropometry.